Welcome to another episode of my podcast that's fun with me. Today we're going to talk about GMOs, and I have a lot of things to say, so let's dive deeper. We're going to talk about statistics first. The United States is the leading country that is using GM crops, and most of the processed food contain the ingredients that were made with the help of GM crops or some products that were grown with GMO. So what means that most of the processed food in the ingredient list might contain corn, soybeans, sugar beets, and canola, for example, canola oil. And that actually leads to the fact that most of the food is actually based on GMOs. Then we're going to Europe, where it's a little bit less popular. And I would say that European legislation system has strict policy on GMOs, and only 2 countries in the European Union has this type of maize. It's only in Spain and it's only in Portugal, as far as I can tell. So they have insect-resistant maize, and if you are kind of producing in Europe any type of food, you have to label that it contains GMO products if it's more than 0.9% of GM ingredient. Then we're going to Russia. In 2016, Russia banned any product that contains GMO, or at least we're not buying seeds, because when I'm saying we, I mean that I'm from Russia. We're not using seeds to produce any type of plants. And that is the main reason most likely we're going to buy some products from other countries. They might contain GMOs, but they have to go through very strict regulations and testing. Then we're going to China, which up until some recent point was not a huge fan of GMO products, also only was in papaya and some cotton. But then later they actually switched because they were getting a lot of products from other countries that they had to manufacture and then distribute all over the world. That is the main reason why they changed a little bit their views on GM products, and that is the main reason why they're right now going to some other areas such as corn and soybeans. And of course, India doesn't have a lot of products with GM. That is the main reason why they're basically using cottonseed oil. And this is the only way it gets through the system of people. And I'm going to be quite honest. When I was reading a lot about Americans, they're fighting some allergy reactions, some issues, some rushes, I was like, is it a problem that they're using a lot of GM products, or it's the reason because of some actual allergy reactions? So I was talking to my friend who had been living in United States for 6 months, and then he moved back Russia about this March, like March of 2026. 2 weeks prior coming home, he faced a severe rush reaction. And now he's back and he's trying to figure this out, because every single time he tried to eat some chocolate or creams or any of the products, he had the weirdest rush. And I would say that he didn't live just in Russia. He lived in New Zealand, he lived in Israel, and then he moved to United States. And this severe reaction he only had in United States. So right now he's trying to figure out what is their issue and problem, but I might have kind of like an answer. And then I am watching some couple from YouTube. They moved from United States to France about 5 years ago, and they said that every single time when they're coming from France to United States to visit their relatives, they actually face some weird problems with their stomach. So within 24 or 48 hours when they land, they have this issue. And at first they thought it was about traveling experience, but now they're pretty much sure that this is a problem with American food system. But you might be more than relieved to know that GMO has probably nothing to do with their stomachs. It's a little bit different. Well, some people, they actually have problems with their stomach and they have gluten allergy. But when they come to Europe, they might not have any issues when they eat pasta or bread or even some donuts, whatever has gluten. The difference and the problem might be that America primarily is growing hard red wheat. So hard red wheat is actually more likely to grow in a very harsh weather conditions. And in Europe, most likely you're going to find soft wheat. It has a little bit different gluten content, and that is the main reason why people might not really have the severe reaction to the gluten. Because if you have allergy to gluten, this is allergy. You can actually feel it no matter where. Like if you eat in the United States or if you eat in Europe, if you are allergic, you're going to be allergic. But But another very important fact is that most of the time, United States, they're going to use some chemicals, and the chemicals, they're sprayed over the crops before they plant any seeds. And most likely this toxin is getting into some food and you can't just wash it off. It's just getting into the seeds, and that is causing this reaction. So the reaction that is causing, it's very linked in intertwined, because non-GMOs crops, most likely they're not going to survive the chemical called glyphosate. And if we're going to talk about some GMO crops, they are most likely to survive this harsh chemical. Another reason why people actually might have problems with gluten problem in general, the United States, they don't really have strict regulations on chemicals that are added to their food. And in the bakery, sometimes people might add some chemicals that might lead to a rise of bread so much faster to produce it all over United States that it might actually cause certain issues. So the reason why it might be different, and once people then when move to Europe or they travel to Europe and they eat some gluten products might not really face it, it's because mainly of some chemicals or because the soft wheat doesn't have such a high gluten content. Another really important issue that Europe most likely is gonna cook bread through traditional methods. And traditional method is more likely to include sourdough. And sourdough breaks down gluten, so it doesn't have a very high gluten protein. But if we're going to talk to United States, where they try to speed up the process with chemicals added and some preservatives added to this, I don't know, breads or pastas, whatever, that might cause an issue. So this might answer some of your questions, guys, but let's talk about the benefits of GMOs. Let's not talk about chemicals right now. Let's talk about benefits of GMOs in particular. So of course, it can resist a lot of different diseases, some pesticides, viruses, weather conditions, and specifically chemicals. It can resist them because it is inserted in their DNAs. And it actually increased the crop yields, I guess, by 22%. Then the profit has risen from like 0 to 68%, as well as I would say that the labor to spend on weeds has decreased, and that is so much important because the chemical used, the glyphosate, is mainly used to spray the fields before the seeds are spreaded, and then later it's going to prevent these weeds from growing. And then finally, one of the other, I guess, benefit of GMO is that GM crops, they produce a natural bacteria toxin that is actually killing caterpillars. And that's really cool because it does not affect human body and it does not affect humans. So it's kind of like natural bacteria. The reason why most of the time GMO products are risky at some point because they can survive harsh chemicals, and these harsh chemicals are heavily used in the United States over their crops. And if we're going to talk about GMO crops, they're not going to survive. Most likely, they're not going to survive the chemical glyphosate. That is the main reason why it's kind of like giving you sense of security. If it's not a GM crop, then most likely they didn't use this type of chemical because it's not going to survive this chemical. And another issue that people have in their concerns that GM crops, most likely when they have this sprayed on glyphosate chemical, it's actually growing some supernatural weeds. These weeds are kind of resistant to this chemical right now. And yeah, nature is adapting, and that is the main reason why these weeds are adapting as well. So they have to produce and manufacture or probably insert a new DNA that's going to be resistant to some harsher chemical, which is not really beneficial to your health. And it's kind of like declining all the benefits of GM crops when they're using on top some chemicals. They're actually causing bloating, inflation, stomach aches, skin rashes, and this is probably the reason why people are suffering from these chemicals, not specifically GM products, but chemicals. And of course, I would say that most likely this is a theory that's going around, but GM crops, they're reducing the diversity, not even GM crops, but GMO, they're reducing the diversity of genetics. So when we're talking about plants, they have evolution, and they have evolution to the state that we know them right now. The reason that it's creating some kind of like theoretical danger, if it happens that some unknown disease for plants is gonna come out of nowhere, or maybe someone is gonna create it in a lab, because for example, United States, they hold majority of this GM seeds, and that is the main reason why they have a potential to grow massive amount of products that are going to be spread all over, I don't know, world. And then if someone creates a new virus that is not resistant, I mean, these GM crops, they're not resistant to this virus because it's a new virus. So the chances that a natural plant is going to resist at least like 30 or 40% of these plants, they might resist because they are going to become immune to this because they went through evolution and from so many viruses and diseases through millions of years. The chance they're going to survive at least 30 or 40% is most likely to be true. But a GM seed is not trained. It's not immune. Of course, it's not immune because it's a new disease. It's not trained to fight back this virus or disease because it's not, let's say, programmed to fight it. And that is the main reason why potentially, in theory, it might be wiped off like for good, like the entire field. That is the main reason why, like, there's a theory going around, but is it true or not? We don't really know because it hasn't happened. And of course, the main disadvantage of this type of crops or GM in general, because such huge companies and conglomerates, I would say, like Byron and many others, they actually have patents on GM seeds. So if you really want to buy some seeds from these companies, they're pretty much expensive. And farmers are not allowed to use these seeds next year, and they're not going to be able to select these seeds in the future. And that is the main reason why it's quite pricey, but it's creating a monopoly in a way around the world when there's huge conglomerates and huge companies, they try to sell the seeds and they are the only owners of the seeds. So I guess you do have certain benefits, but unfortunately, because of some chemicals, most likely these crops, they're not going to survive. And another huge benefit of, I would say, GM crops is countries that don't really have enough food, they can actually rely on these crops because they're Roundup crops. So they can survive harsh weather conditions and they can be used all year around. And we're going to talk about some other seeds, they're organic seeds, I would say, with no GMO. Then they have to be seeded only in certain period of like weather period. They might be sensitive to some weather conditions, and that might be an issue. So Europe is more likely to have like organic, let's call it, or natural crops because this country, not country, but like the European Union is a little bit more, I guess, safe in the way that they can afford it. And countries such as Africa and India, though India doesn't really have lots of these crops, they're more likely wanting to have this type of seeds so they can grow them all year round, and they're not gonna be left out if a disease or virus or weather condition happens, and they will have no food to feed their population. And that is really important to actually say that most likely organic food that is heavily promoted around the United States, it's quite interesting because they don't actually have GMO, and most likely they have no chemicals added because there's a strict regulation that is prohibiting them to use these harsh chemicals. And of course, these crops, they're just not going to survive because they have no DNA immune system against these chemicals. But sometimes it's good because these ingredients, they're cleaner for sure, but you have to remember that potato chips are still potato chips, sugar is still sugar. So if it says that it's organic, it doesn't mean that it's not going to affect your body if you eat too much. Okay, so just you have to keep this in mind. There's a PR behind that, and I totally get it, but it is actually giving you a cleaner, I guess, ingredient list in terms of toxins. So they're not allowed to use these toxins that are used in GM crops. And of course, I want to talk about Russia. So why did Russia actually ban GM seeds or GMO in general? And everyone like, then probably it's bad. Maybe it's bad because why did Russia actually ban that? The reason is interesting. There's three main potential reasons for that. The first one is economy. Russia is advertising crops as organic, so it's natural. And that is the main reason why it's allowing them to put premium price on the products. Like, look at this, we have organic foods, we don't really use any GMOs, and they're selling these products at a premium price. So this is the first factor. The second one is independence, because right now we have sanctions, we have some problems, and a lot of the times most corporations and companies, they say like, you are under sanctions, so we're not going to sell you the seeds, we're not going to sell you this and that. And it's actually protecting Russia from this unexpected changes, and Russia is not relying on sanctions in this position. So they're like, we have organic food and we have our organic crops. We don't really have to rely on you, like United States or basically United States. Europe is not growing and importing that much GM crops. So, and then we're going to talk real quick about the policy. It's very interesting because I mentioned this right in the beginning of the podcast that most likely people are scared of GM crops or GMO in general. And it's actually given some very interesting idea to the government that they're saying, we're protecting you if you don't really like GMOs or you don't really like GM products and seeds and whatever and crops. We're not going to do that. We're going to save you from this and that, from some extra disease and whatever. They still can use chemicals, but there's a kind of like problem around GMO as well. And 80% of people, they're super skeptical of GMO. And that is the main reason why when the law was signed, it was brilliant because people were like, yeah, we like our policy, we like our government, so we're going to support them. This is the third reason why it actually has certain benefits for Russia not to buy this type of seeds. And I would say, this is just my point of view, that GM crops, they're quite beneficial. I totally get it. Unfortunately, they can resist chemicals, and it's literally killing all the benefits of GM crops. I mean, it's really cool, but it's kind of scary that all these chemicals they're getting in the bodies, and people they're getting, rushes and bloating and stomach aches. And actually, when I was doing my research, I can't tell you how it's working, but as I can tell, chemicals they're produced from GMO or like the scientist they're inserting some kind of like in DNA, they're creating some code that is going to be resistant to some disease or virus or whatever. And then when they get this DNA, they put this in sugar with water and is brewing, such as like similar to the beer process. And then all the organisms or all the kind of like life is dying and it's creating a harsh chemical or just a chemical that has nothing related to GMO, but it's kind of created with the help of GMO. Kind of like this. I might be wrong at this part because I was trying to get into that. I'm not a scientist. That is the main reason why I don't really know how it works. But as far as I can tell through my research, this is somewhat like the way it works. But I might be absolutely wrong, 100% wrong. You are most likely to share your experience and your position in the comments. I am still going to stand on the fact that we still have no idea how GM products or GMO is going to affect the body in the future. I mean, is it really safe, or we're kind of like losing something? Because when some certain plants, they're going through evolution, maybe they can give us more benefits that we don't even know about. And we're kind of like giving them some code that is known to a human, but there might be some beauty in evolution. And that is the main reason why we probably should keep on organic products and not get too much, I guess, science behind the seeds and behind these type of products. But I might be, again, super wrong because I totally get when you have to feed people and it can produce it can produce more, I guess, products and increase your crops by 22%. I totally get and I see the benefits, but I still see all the negatives with chemicals, toxins, and lack of genetically identical seeds. Just like we don't really need maybe something identical. Maybe sometimes it's good when certain evolution is playing its role and it's going in a little bit different direction. We don't really know. We don't really know that. Okay, let me know, guys. What do you think? And I'll see you in my next podcast. That's fine with me. Love you all. Bye.